Hi everyone, thank you for joining us today for this important webinar. I'm Jessica Stewart, I'm the Executive Director of Family and Community Services, Insights, Analysis and Research, also known as FACSIAR in the Department of Communities and Justice. And welcome to this month's Lunch and Learn research seminar on accessing social housing data for planning and research, 2023 New South Wales Social Housing Assistance Commissioning Data Report. So before we begin, I would like to acknowledge that wherever we are joining today's webinar from across New South Wales, we're all living and working on Aboriginal land that was never ceded. I would personally like to acknowledge the Bidjigal and Gadigal people who are the owners and First Nations people of the area where I have the privilege of joining you all from today. I'd also like to pay my respects to all First Nations elders, past and present, and to future and emerging leaders. And I'd like to extend that respect to our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander colleagues joining us today. I'd also like to acknowledge that this week is National Reconciliation Week, which is a time for all of us to learn about our shared histories, cultures and achievements, and explore how each of us can contribute to achieving reconciliation in Australia. I'd also like to warmly welcome all of you, all of our webinar participants that we have with us today. It's great to see around 450 people register for today. It shows how important this topic is for so many of you. So we'll have 3 presentations about social housing policy, about accessing relevant data and current trends and insights. We'll then have a discussion with a senior policy analyst on using DCJ data for analysis of housing needs and opportunities across New South Wales. So after the presentations, we'll have a short Q&A if we have enough time at the end. So please put any questions or comments that you may have in the chat box during the presentations, and I can come to these at the end. So now I'd like to introduce to you all our presenters for this afternoon. So Emma Nicholson is the Acting Executive Director of Strategy, Policy and Regulation at the new Homes New South Wales, a New South Wales government agency in the Department of Communities and Justice. She's passionate about generating more and better homes, that residents and communities have a great experience when connecting with government and partnering to achieve this. Emma has worked across the Aboriginal and mainstream housing portfolios, as well as the disability, women, intergovernmental and industrial relations portfolios, and in her earlier career as a journalist and acrobat. Welcome, Emma. Despina Karlsson is a strategic policy professional who has been working for DCJ in the social housing portfolio since 2018. As a former social housing tenant herself, she works to place the spotlight on the people behind the numbers, using data insights and evidence to support decision-making and outcomes from the most vulnerable members of our community. Thank you so much, Despina. Peter Reily is the Director of Organisational Performance in FACSIAR for within the Department of DCJ. Peter has a diverse public sector background, having worked across a number of agencies, and has spent the last 17 years working in performance analysis and reporting. In his current role, Peter is responsible for DCJ state and national data development and reporting in these portfolio areas. And as I know, because I work with Peter, knows almost everything there is to know about housing data. So Poppy Dowsett. Hi, Poppy is a Principal Policy Officer, Portfolio Strategy and Origination, Housing Portfolio in Homes New South Wales. Poppy has worked in social and affordable housing for over 15 years in state government, consulting and the not-for-profit sector. In her current role with Homes New South Wales, Poppy is undertaking a comparative analysis of housing needs and opportunities across New South Wales, considering demand, livability, environmental risk and growth opportunities. This project is greatly supported by data from the FACSIAR team, among other sources. So thank you all for joining us today and for your presentations. I also just want to let everyone know that this session will be recorded and posted to our FACSIAR webpage. So anyone that is registered for this webinar, you'll receive a link to the recording within about 1 week. So thank you all, and please go ahead, Emma.
Thanks, Jess. Hi, everyone. Look, really just wanted to introduce this piece. I think there might be one more slide to come. Homes New South Wales was an election commitment of the New South Wales government. It launched on the 1st of February. We actually started just with the housing functions, and we've just welcomed our homelessness colleagues just on Friday. All I really want to say is our purpose at Homes New South Wales absolutely is to generate more and better homes and to make sure people feel really good when they connect with us, and our funded service partners when they need help with housing. And so to that, this kind of data set absolutely just helps us really say who needs housing, what kind of homes do they need, and where do they need it. And so the more focused we can get on that, the sooner we can generate more homes for people who need them. We can reconfigure homes that actually aren't the right shape or aren't located in the best of places anymore. And we can absolutely think about making every single dollar and every single building that we have work as hard as it possibly can for every single person who needs our assistance and support. So we are really keen to make sure people are using the data, telling us what else they need, expanding it and extending it so that more parts of the homelessness and the housing system are joined up, both from an insights perspective, a service design perspective, and then also that we're able to test, do these numbers really reflect what the people who actually need our services or use our services think about them. And so one of the next big steps also in Homes New South Wales is making sure we're absolutely making room to invite and welcome and listen to the people who need our services and who are using our services. So the intention here is that in the future, the lunch and learns will just get bigger and better and be informed by all sorts of additional types of insights. But I thank you for making the time, and I hope that the data sets really help you understand what we're all doing here and better design and deliver the services that you are also supporting us and partnering with us to do. It's probably enough from me. I'll hand over to Despina, who leads the Insights team and has led the production of all this work.
Thanks, Emma. Well, welcome, and thanks for making time today to come and listen to this presentation. I just want to acknowledge I'm calling in from Darkinjung country on the central coast of New South Wales. Social Housing Assistance Commissioning data set and report has been a labour of love of several years for my team. We really started with a strategic outlook to bring together data and create a time series that would help us to interrogate more strategic policy questions, to answer strategic policy questions, but also to get to the heart of the experience that our clients are having and understand better who those clients are, where they are and what they need. We've managed to make data available to the public that has not been available in the past at a level of granularity that is quite unusual across Australia. You won't find another data report like this in any other state or territory jurisdiction. We've provided data for the first time all the way down to allocation zone, but also with demographic data attached on our social housing applicants, so the wait list, as well as our tenants. And when we talk about social housing tenants, that includes the DCJ managed tenancies, so public housing, Aboriginal housing office tenancies, and community housing providers that are providing social housing. So the development of this data set, and we're talking about a data set that's time series comparable from 2017 to 2023, and each year has easily hundreds of thousands of de-identified unit records in it that form the back end of the data set. So we have this enormous reservoir of information from which we mined insights and headline figures for social housing tenancies, social housing applications. We've also included data on individuals, and for the first time, we've looked at data by the oldest person in the household rather than simply by the head tenant or the head applicant. We've also managed to go into the demographics of households and make visible other members of the household, for example, children. So you now have a wealth of data in the public domain through the data report and its associated appendix. The appendix has been treated for privacy because we're very cognizant of protecting the privacy of our clients. So we have used some privacy suppression in the appendix. However, it does provide a much more detailed view of social housing applicants and tenants than has been made available before. Now, the purpose of this is really about improving the access of people like yourselves to high quality data for research, for evidence, for planning, for service delivery planning, and also across the Homes Organisation and DCJ for operational and strategic policy, and for the commissioning of social housing. So I'm going to go into a couple of insights from the report itself, just to give you a bit of a flavour, and also to give you some examples of how you can think about the data, use the data. One of the key things with this data set is obviously it's administrative data from the Homes and Chimes systems, owned and managed by DCJ and Homes New South Wales. The key thing is that when you're dealing with a data set of this size and granularity, understanding how to read the data is critical. So we spent a lot of time in the data report explaining what is included in the figures that are shown. So there's a glossary, extensive endnotes, and caveats to explain what it is you're being shown in the data. But I'll take you through some of the key insights. So as of 30th of June 2023, there were 67,808 households on the New South Wales Housing Register. Now, typically, when you look at data in the public domain around the waitlist, it talks to applicants, which is entirely understandable. Applicants are still waiting for a placement. The Social Housing Register also includes a transfer and relocations register within it, and those are existing social housing tenants who need to move. Now, for the purposes of service delivery planning, it's really important to know who those people are, equally as your applicant households who are still waiting to be placed. So all throughout the data report and the data set, we have provided data on the transfer relocation households as well as the applicants. So this figure of 67,808 households includes 48,000 general applicants who are waiting for a placement, 7,573 priority applicants who are waiting for a placement, as well as your transfer households. So escalated transfers are households that have a social housing tenancy and an urgent need to move. So when you combine escalated transfers and relocations with your priority applicants, so that's your 5,348 households with your 7,573 priority applicants, you get your a genuine view of the urgent need in the social housing system. Now, we know that our Aboriginal community is around 3% of the overall population, but they represent between 17 and 20% of our clients, depending on which particular group of clients you're looking at. We also know that demand for housing assistance from Aboriginal people and families are greater than the data we currently have available. So, for example, the New South Wales Housing Register does not capture all Aboriginal community housing wait lists. So we are very clear when we're talking about the wait list that this is the demand and the need that we can see on the government's register, but it is not reflective of all Aboriginal community demand and need for social housing. So research and information held by local Aboriginal organisations such as decision-making groups, empowered communities and other alliances intentionally formed by Aboriginal community-controlled organisations and their network, we are working with them to speak to, how we add a more full view of Aboriginal community need to the data that we already have. So that's an ongoing piece of work. We're also working with the Closing the Gap Data Officer Level Working Group to improve our data and ensure that data sovereignty is respected in line with Priority 4 and Form 4 under the National Partnership Agreement on Closing the Gap. I'm giving you a bit of a sneak peek into our back catalogue here. We have published data from financial years 2021 through 2023 on the DCJ website. This graph obviously includes data back into our time series to 2017, but I've included it here because it tells a really interesting story about what's going on at the moment in priority applicant demand. So this is just those priority applicants that are in the community waiting for a placement. And they're obviously the urgent need group in that register. And we can see that there was this takeoff, this escalation of need, priority urgent need in other metro and regional households. So we can see the COVID and post-COVID housing situation reflected in this graph. And it's really interesting to see how the rental affordability crisis has actually had an impact on the regional communities, regional and rural communities. So there's a cohort of people here that were meeting their own housing needs who are no longer able to do so. And we're seeing that group come onto our priority wait list. I saw a brief comment there about what does priority mean. With the New South Wales Housing Register, when you make an application for housing assistance, you need to demonstrate a couple of things. One is obviously that your household income falls within the threshold for eligibility for social housing assistance. But then to be recognised as a priority applicant, you need to demonstrate a few extra steps. So the key ones for this group are that you cannot meet your housing need in the private market, so you cannot get a rental. And that's typically, using, a very significant portion of your income, that even using a significant portion of your income, you can't source a private rental. And you also demonstrate other risk factors. And actually, we're about to speak to some of those, so I'll go to that slide. Yeah. So, for example, on this graph, you can see we have the priority wait list, at risk, homeless, people with medical and disability, and another group. So to continue answering that question about what constitutes priority, if you're at risk of abuse or neglect, domestic violence, if you're homeless, you're in a refuge, you're in a situation of severe overcrowding, which does actually meet the definition of homelessness. And if you have a serious disability or ongoing chronic medical condition that is contributing to your inability to meet your own housing needs in the market, that also forms part of the evidence base for you to be a priority applicant for social housing. Now, the interesting thing about this graph, we've got 12,921 households that need to move or need a home now. So this is the combination of escalated transfers and applicants on the wait list. If we were just looking at applicants for this graph, the disability medical cohort is nearly 50%. And often this is an interesting point for people when they first hear it, because it's often assumed that, homelessness is the, highest driver of need to social housing. But you do have a cohort of people who cannot be unhoused without it being a major risk to their health as well. And that group is very strongly represented on the wait list. So people, who they may in fact be waiting for social housing from a hospital bed. That does happen. Now, in this particular graph, you can see the Aboriginal households and non-Aboriginal households. This is probably a good moment to say that throughout the data report, the way that we have presented the data, given the significance of the Aboriginal community as it's represented in our client data, that they're 3% of the population and between 17 and 20% of our clients, wherever possible, we've presented the data for everybody, and then we've presented a specific view for Aboriginal clients. And the way we've done that is if one person in the household identifies as Aboriginal, we've presented those households as Aboriginal identifying households. And in the data report, there's a whole section dedicated just to Aboriginal households and their data points. In the appendix, wherever we've provided a tab for everybody, so let's say we've provided a tab of data for the whole wait list, we've then provided a mirroring tab, formatted exactly the same, but for Aboriginal only households. And yes, I saw that question come up. No, we can't disaggregate specific disabilities or specific medical conditions. The priority codes that we can see here in this graph, they're general markers that give us a bit of an indication to get more detail about people's conditions and, you know, their individual situations. It's in their case notes, and we don't publish any of that information. Now, over the last 2 years, we've seen overall growth of 12% on the wait list, but you can see where the critical pain points are. And it's very interesting to see the difference between the overall growth on the list and the escalation in growth in those urgent cohorts. Each of the key urgent need cohorts are actually seeing quite strong growth. So priority applicants are up 30% in 2 years. Escalated transfers and relocations are up nearly 20%. Elderly general applicants, so they're a small group, they're a small subsection of the general wait list. They sit at the top of the general wait list in terms of triaging, and they're aged 80 and over. They don't have any of those other at-risk markers, so the medical disability or the abuse or neglect markers, but they are given their own special category just based on the fact that they are 80 and over. And they, as I said, sit in the general applicant group. That group grew 27% in two years. So you can see the cumulative effect, which we also see in Treasury's intergenerational report, of this generation coming through with lower rates of housing equity, who are finding themselves in housing distress as they get older. When we look at children on the register and also on tenancies, I've put this together here. We've got 28,000 non-Aboriginal children on the housing register, 7,270 Aboriginal children aged 15 and under on the register waiting for assistance. That's not including any transfer households. So this is just the group in the community waiting for assistance. In DCJ tenancies, we've got 23,000 non-Aboriginal children and 8,728 Aboriginal children aged 15 and under in our tenancies. Thinking about how we support those households is so key to the well-being and the outcomes that we see for those households. So it's very good to have that information front of mind when we're making policy decisions. So going to tenancies as a whole, we have 138,000 social housing tenancies. It's really important to note that this slide refers to the management of social housing tenancies, not the ownership of the asset. They're two very distinct, different things. We have community housing providers that manage tenancies for properties that are owned by the New South Wales government. So this is simply management of social housing tenancies, but it does give you an idea of the distribution of those responsibilities. Oh, I'm going to run out of time. Okay. So in those 138,000 households, there were 95,000 DCJ managed tenancies, and that's what we're looking at here. We're not looking at the whole 138,000 households. We're looking at 95,000 DCJ managed social housing tenancies. So that's public housing and Aboriginal Housing Office. This gives you just a bit of a snapshot of who we're talking about. Again, telling these stories is really about getting a clearer idea of who our clients are so that we can make better decisions about how we help them and get the most out of the resources that we have to help the most people. You can see that we've got 74,000 seniors in that group of DCJ managed tenancies. That's a large number of older people. We have to think about, what does tenancy management look like for that group? We have obviously our group of youth, 16,000, 31,900 children aged 15 and under total, and we've got 36,000 people on a disability support pension. In terms of households, we've got 11,000 single parent households. Incidentally, single parents make up 25% of the waitlist. It's a very significant portion of the waitlist. Single person households definitely dominate both the tenancies and the waitlist households. They're around 50% or more of both. And we have 13,000 Aboriginal households in our tenancies at the moment. Tenancies are flat, so we're not seeing an increase in the number of tenancies. You contrast that with the rise in the waitlist. You can see the disconnect. You can see the urgency of the need. And you can also see that then what that means is the people that we're housing will be at that upper, like an increasingly concentrated group in urgent need. I wanted to share this slide because I've always found it very interesting that, you know, there's a lot of conversation that happens around positive and negative exits from social housing. But I wanted to share this slide because, as you can see, positive exits are 9% annually of exits, and negative exits are 8%. So a very small portion of exits. What we don't know about exits exceeds what we do know. So 83% are considered other exits. Obviously, there will be some positive and negative exits in that other group, but other exits include reasons such as a tenant moving to aged care or family support accommodation, which is actually a very significant group, close to 30%. Death is also a very significant group. And then also this category of other also includes imprisonment of the tenant. Negative exits are very specific. They refer to households where the tenancy ended due to a breach of the tenancy agreement. So it could be an eviction, an NCAT situation, an abandonment of the property with no notice. Positive exits refer to tenant-initiated exits and provider-initiated exits, where people have moved out of social housing and into private rental, home ownership or affordable housing. Now, this is the best bit, okay? I've got 3 minutes. So how do you use the report and appendix? If you take one takeaway from this presentation, access the report online, access the appendix, download the report, download the appendix. The report reads as a bit of a primer to the rest of the appendix. So if you go in, you find a topic of interest. Let's say you're interested in single person households, single parent households, you're interested in couples, etc. You want to know what the household configuration looks like on the wait list, but you want to know that information for your local area. You go to the report. The report will give you the New South Wales total on that topic, and then the footnote for that figure will give you the tab number in the appendix where you can find that data at New South Wales level, district level, and allocation zone level. So you actually use the data report to read the appendix because it's like 70 tabs worth of data. So we tried to make it as user-friendly as possible, using the data report as a way and a means to read the extensive tabs in the appendix. I hope that that's helpful. And like I said, wherever there's a tab for all data, there will be a mirroring tab for Aboriginal only data. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us in the commissioning data team, so commissioning.data@homes.nsw.gov.au. We would be more than happy to answer your questions, provide you with assistance about how you can best use the data. But I just want to leave you with this thought that when we understand the stories of people in the data, it gives us an opportunity to make better decisions, to help more people, to get those outcomes that Emma was talking about earlier. And that's been a real passion and driver for my team. So I want to take this opportunity to thank them and shout out to Kieran Grimston, without which this was not possible. This enormous task was not possible. So a little round of applause there for Kieran Grimston. Thank you very much, everybody, for your time today. I really appreciate you showing up.
Thanks, Despina. I think it's me now.
And to you, Peter. Yep.
Thank you. I'll be talking to you about the public dashboards that we release. I only have 10 minutes, so I'll be just showing you some screenshots, and you'll be able to have links there to go to the actual dashboards. So we collect data for a number of strategic purposes, and in this slide I've shown you in yellow the areas that I'll be covering today, and I've got in purple there what Despina's covered already. And the point to make is that this data all uses the same underlying data set. And so what's different about the data is how we present the data. And some of these things may fit under more than one category, but I've placed them under one category for the sake of simplicity. But basically, the data is displayed differently, in more detail, more segregation, and depending on what your use of the data is, you may prefer to go to Despina's data set. You may prefer to start with some of our data we've got here, and there should be some commonality, and you'll see as we go through the presentation that there's a big overlap between what Despina's talked about and what we present in our public dashboards and in the other products. So firstly, I want to cover, under the theme of openness and transparency, these 4 dashboards. And I'll go firstly to the annual statistical report, or the ASR. You probably can't read that, as I can't read it, but there's a large number of measures that are in this dashboard. And the dashboard also has data on child protection and out-of-home care as well. But for housing, there are quite a number of measures. And the data we have on social housing is more extensive for public housing and AHO managed properties. So you'll see that many of these breakdowns and segregations are much more focused on public housing and AHO properties. So the dashboard has the same structure to it, which is that there's a top section that has a headline number. And that 55,088 number is the number that, if you add up the 2 numbers that Kieran, there's been a mention around the wait list of people waiting for housing. This will be the priority and general housing numbers added together. And as you click on each of these tabs, it'll take you to. It'll change the bottom part of the screen. And the bottom part of the screen will show a much more detailed view of those numbers. And here's the same number we saw on the top view there, and then you've got the trend going back 10 years or 11 years. And at the top here, you've got various filters, and they vary in terms of how many filters there are and whether you can use them in isolation or in combination. And on the right-hand side here, if this dashboard are the filters that are available. And if we now go to this next screenshot, what I've done here is applied a few filters. So this is Aboriginal households in a particular district with the household type of single parent with dependent children. You can see that the numbers obviously have changed to reflect that particular cohort. So in a way, this might be if you think about what Despina talked about, this might be an example of how you might do a bit of shopping about what you might be interested in doing, and then you go into the detail that's in the commissioning data set to look at look more detailed information. So the next product is the quality dashboard, and these are the measures in the quality dashboard, and they overlap with the annual dashboard and some different measures as well. And basically the value of this data is that it's in fact released quarterly rather than annually. And so the presentation is a little bit different. It's less detailed, but it does show you 5 quarters of data, the current quarter and the previous 4 quarters. So you can compare the current quarter with the previous quarter and the current quarter with the same quarter in the previous year. That addresses seasonality issues. For example, during certain months, there may be more people who are seeking accommodation, or things may change over time. So you can see any seasonality in the data in these dashboards. The next dashboard I want to mention is the social housing dwellings dashboard. This gives us a complete picture of the dwellings in New South Wales in social housing. It's made up of four components: the public housing, the housing that's community housing, which make up the next biggest section, the properties owned by Aboriginal Housing Office, and then the Aboriginal community housing properties. And you can, in this dashboard, filter the data by district, and you can see the breakdown is available by dwelling type as well as number of bedrooms. This is useful if you want to get an idea of, if you're, for example, a potential applicant, you want to get an idea of how many properties there are in a particular location. You might be able to look at this information. This dashboard came about from the change in government, where there was expectation from the new government that they would release data more often. So this data is data on social housing applicant households on the register. Again, people waiting for housing, and it's data each month. And the data each month, at the end of each month, is available for both priority and general. We also have how many households were housed each month, both in priority and general. You can see there's a lot more housing of priority applicants than general applicants. And it also, at the bottom there, has 2 charts that show the median wait time for people on the general who are housed from the general list and from the priority list. And you can see it's 24 months for people on general wait list, and it's 3.4 months for people on the priority wait list. So there's a big difference between the median time to be housed. I'm going to now switch to accountability. As I said earlier, these dashboards have multiple purposes, but we do have 2 products that are where New South Wales data is included in national publications, the Report on Government Services, ROGS, and Housing Assistance in Australia report. I'm going to focus on ROGS for sake of time. So the ROGS is released each year and includes chapters on housing and homelessness, and it uses a performance framework to talk about measures and outcomes. And the framework is common to all chapters. And it's equity, effectiveness, and efficiency. And this picture shows you the comparability of measures across jurisdictions. And you can see there's a code on the bottom left there. And for housing, and there are no measures that are deemed to be comparable or complete across Australia. So the housing and child protection chapters in particular that DCJ deals with have the least comparability of most chapters in the report. For housing, it looks pretty dire, but part of that is because it talks about comparability within programs, between public housing and community housing, for example. But it's still not very complete. So that's a challenge for reporting. And so this is an example of the ROGS report, which is now only online. and it shows Australia top there, and then in the bottom chart shows New South Wales numbers, and each jurisdiction is shown separately. You can't see them together. That's been done deliberately, and New South Wales argued very strongly to have it presented this way because it was unfair to compare New South Wales to another jurisdiction when the measure is not comparable. And so we have a presentation like this, and most of these measures are presented in charts like this, but also ROGS has tables, and the tables are in Excel downloadable or CSV files, and they contain the data behind the charts. They also contain additional data which are descriptive or contextual data, and this is an example of the data that's available on public housing, social housing dwelling numbers. And you can see that for New South Wales, the numbers have been going down for public housing, but that's been offset by the numbers going up for community housing to do with the transfers and so on. This next product I want to talk about is one product which is, I suppose, geared for actual applicants, and it's the expected wait times dashboard. And it has the most frequent use of the dashboard, so 12,000 plus views per month. And it gives us data on expected wait time by allocation zone, by bedroom category in New South Wales. And it also gives you the number of general applicants waiting for each of those allocation zones. We only provide data on general applicants because that's the time that people are waiting a very long time. Priority applicants, as we saw earlier, the time is a few months, whereas for general applicants, the median is 24 months. This dashboard provides the wait times in bands, less than 2 years, 2 to 5 years, 5 to 10 years, 10 years. And what we were surprised by is that this is an example of two different allocation zones, one metro and one non-metro. And you can see the times, the expected wait times there are 10 years plus, 5 to 10 years, much longer than the median. And you can see on the right-hand side that it tells us that there are no properties of that size in a particular location, and the wait time is 2 to 5 years. The reason why the times are different is because this dashboard presents times at the 90th percentile, not the 50th percentile, not the median. And we do that because if the average person looks at the dashboard and we provided the median, half would be happy because they'd be housed before the median, and half would be unhappy and they'd be housed after the median. They'd be complaining about why they were told it would take 24 months. It's taken 48 months or 50 months or 5 years or 10 years. 90th percentile means that within that band, 9 out of 10 people will be housed, and so most people will be housed before the band. One out of every 10 people will be unhappy because they've waited longer than 10 years or 5 years to be housed. So I want to also just talk briefly about a couple of products that are also in that evidence-based planning section, and the first one is rent and sales. The rent and sales data is data from private rentals and sales, private sales, and we collect the bonds data or get it from the rental bond board, and we present the data in these reports every quarter. And we all know that rents and property prices have been going up. This quantifies those movements at an LGA level. There are heat maps there that show the price differences, and as I said, it shows the median, the first quartile, the last fourth quartile, and so on. And it shows sales prices as well in terms of property sold for. It also has data by metro and greater metropolitan area and rest of New South Wales. It has data by type of property, houses versus townhouses versus flats and units. The final thing I want to talk about is the local government housing kit. This is a useful kit. It has information which is supplement to our admin data, and it has, for example, demographic information on economic labour force data, housing supply, and on affordability. And so it's useful because it gives you, this is the demographic page, it gives you information around the population, the last 3 census. It also allows you to compare side by side to different LGAs. So you can compare 2 LGAs on their profile. Here's a picture of housing supply, and again, it's got various metrics there, dwelling total and so on. The composition of properties by LGA, and then we've got housing costs data, and that's the end of my presentation. I was very mindful of being always criticised talking too long, so I try to be very quick.
Fantastic. Thank you so much to Emma, Despina and Peter. They were all really interesting presentations, and I've seen a number of questions come in the chat which we can turn to at the end, and thank you to those who are answering lots of those as well. So we'll now move to Poppy Dowsett, who uses the social housing data in her work analysing housing needs and opportunities across New South Wales. So Poppy, thank you. We just have a few questions to go through. So the work of you and your team sounds really interesting, and part of it is around identifying the optimal locations for new social and affordable housing across New South Wales. So could you tell us a little bit more about your role?
Yeah, thanks, Jessica, and hi everyone. So I work in the housing portfolio team in Homes New South Wales, as you mentioned. We're the division that maintains homes and delivers new homes in the social housing portfolio, and we are enthusiastic supporters of the data that's being presented today. The specific team I work in is called Portfolio Strategy and Origination. So we look for opportunities or sites to build new homes. I guess every home that gets built starts with a site. So it's a really great area to work in as long as you're comfortable with delayed gratification, because it takes a few years to go from a site to an actual key in the front door. But in a nutshell, that's our role.
That's terrific. Thank you. And how does the data and some of the data we've discussed today, how does that help in the work that you do?
Yeah, so we use a lot of data to inform our work. Most of the data is publicly accessible or publicly available from government agencies and universities and other researchers. So, for example, we use a lot of ABS census data, as well as data from the Department of Social Services, which is a Commonwealth department. We use climate data from ADAPT New South Wales and the New South Wales Reconstruction Authority. We use our own internal property data as well. There are different ways to consider demand for social housing. There's probably a PhD in it, or where housing is needed. You can look at the ratio of incomes to housing costs, which varies greatly by area. You can look at levels of rental and mortgage stress. You can look at how many people are receiving Commonwealth rent assistance, so people struggling to pay prices of the rental market, and many other factors. But the DCJ commissioning data that's been presented today is about those people who are eligible for housing and are on the housing register and who've stated where they wish to live. And this gives us a picture of demand that we just can't get from any other source. It's really, really valuable.
That's great, thank you. And would you be able to walk us through an example of a project that uses DCJ data?
Yeah, so as you mentioned in your introduction, we're currently looking at housing demand across all metropolitan areas of New South Wales. So that's all of the Greater Sydney local government areas, as well as other metro areas, so Wollongong, Newcastle and Central Coast. And this is a second piece, a companion piece, if you like, of work following the regional housing analysis that we did previously. I think it's fair to say it's universally acknowledged that there's demand for social housing everywhere. And the aim of our study is to understand the nature of the demand and how it differs from place to place, so that we can build the homes that meet the specific needs and the opportunities of that area. So as an example, the need could be in a certain location for larger properties to house families, And the opportunity could be available land that is zoned for medium density housing that's well located close to transport and services. That's sort of the sweet spot that we're trying to find. And the commissioning data is a really key input for this analysis because it tells us how long the average wait time for social housing is in that area, which varies a lot, the proportion of different household sizes waiting for housing, as well as other information such as household age and the need for modifications. And when we combine this with other data sources, it gives a really nuanced picture of where housing is needed and the kind of housing that is needed. And that really helps with design and delivery to deliver the homes in those locations. So another round of applause for the team behind the fantastic data presented today. Thanks, Jessica, and everyone.
Thanks so much, Poppy. So we'll now turn to any questions in the chat, and it looks like the vast majority of them have been answered. Peter, I might just go to you because there's a bit of back and forth and interest in why we show median and not average wait time, and we have put an answer there, but it might be worthwhile just explaining that to people as well.
I just wrote an answer myself, but I'll just repeat it in verbally as well. Basically, it's to do with the distribution of the data. So when the data is not normally distributed, we have the option of mean, median or mode as measures of central tenancy, and mean is adversely affected in data where, for example, I've got the example there of the $10 million or $25 million house that sells in a suburb. It shouldn't affect shouldn't distort the average price that we see, and so we use median for that reason rather than mean. Sometimes if you calculate median and mean, it's very, very similar. Other times it can be very different.
Thank you. Are there any questions that I may have missed before we start to wrap things up? I think that's everything. So before we close, I just wanted to ask each of you, each of our presenters, if you had one final thing that you'd like our listeners today to take away from today's webinar and you'd like them to think about, what would that be? So I might start with you, Emma.
On the spot, look, make the most of it. Tell us what you're using. Tell us what you're not using. A couple of years ago, this was done, and it became really clear we needed to do the work with local government area insights, because actually it's local councils on an LGA basis that approve housing. So we really need to understand demand based on council configurations and planning consideration. So if you find as you're using it, actually you really need to know a thing, give us a call, let us know. We can only deliver more housing and better homes if we're partnering with everyone and everyone's doing the best they can, and that includes working off really good information. So we're here to help. Let us know.
Terrific. Thanks, Emma. Despina?
And just echoing what Emma said, that just there actually is, let us know how you're using the data so that we can continue to improve what we're presenting to you. Our objective here is to be as useful as possible. And just to reiterate, use the report to read the appendix. It'll make it a lot easier to digest the information that's in the appendix.
That's great advice. Thank you. Peter, any final reflections?
Same theme. There's two issues: there's content and there's presentation. So there might be gaps in content. The amount of data we can present to you in dashboards is infinite, really, in terms of combinations, but we select a particular set of combinations. So in the ASR, for example, there's probably hundreds of permutations already there.
That's our annual statistical report that's available online.
There could be thousands, and the way presented has been deemed to be helpful and useful. But if you provide us data, feedback saying it's not, we have, for example, introduced in that ASR a button to change it to a table or to a line chart or a bar chart. You can switch the way it's presented if you prefer one of those. And as I said, all the data is useful. It's sometimes slightly different, and there's reasons why it might be slightly different, as has been called out in terms of the escalated the transfers versus the other data. And so we'd be interested in finding out if you find errors in our data as well and telling us that there's something funny, or we can tell you it's wrong or no, it's misinterpreted. So the best thing to say is use it and give us feedback. You know.
Terrific. Great message. Thank you. And Poppy, any final thoughts from you?
Yeah, I guess just as a user rather than creator of data, I'd just say that it's fundamental to good decision making. So it's not everything, but I don't think you can get good decisions made without good information that goes into it. So it's extremely important work. Thank you.
Terrific. Well, thanks everyone. So thank you for joining us today. So all of you who have registered will receive an email with a link to the recording of the webinar in the next week or so. I will also provide some additional links and materials related to the webinar that we've discussed today. And we'd also like to warmly invite you to our next Lunch and Learn, which will be held at 1 p.m. on the 18th of June. And the topic is looking at Indigenous data sovereignty and the Closing the Gap priority around Priority Reform 4, which is on that topic. And it is titled Making It Easier for Aboriginal Communities to Access and Use Government-Held Data, which should be a really interesting discussion. So I hope you're able to join us next month. And for now, have a great rest of your day. Thank you all again.